Nebbia is a revolutionary showerhead that saves you money by using 45% less water, but with a stream of water that's way more powerful than what you get with other showerheads. To get 15% off, go to nebbia.com/Pakman and use the code Pakman. It's another day, and tragically, it's another mass shooting. At least 10 people have been killed in Colorado in a supermarket shooting. As often is the case with these incidents, the news, the details are still coming in. The Associated Press has a good summary so far, and they write that a shooting at a Colorado supermarket yesterday killed 10 people, including one police officer who was the first to respond to the scene. The suspect has been taken alive. Police have not yet revealed the suspect's name, although we know it is a male individual. Not too many other details have yet been released, and investigators are sorting through evidence. This happened at the King Soopers store in Boulder, Colorado. This is Boulder is about 25 miles. I think it's about 40-ish minutes from Denver. This was the 7th mass killing in the United States this year. We just had a shooting on March 16th, which of course left 8 people dead at some massage businesses in the Atlanta area in the state of Georgia. And, you know, I don't want to make any jokes about this. This is insane what is going on. But one of the things that was sort of different during the pandemic was that the mass shootings slowed down. And I saw someone saying, you can tell we're coming out of the pandemic because the mass shootings are increasing. And it's not even a joke. I mean, it's sad that that's the reality. The officer who died is 51-year-old Eric Talley, who had been with the Boulder police for about 11 years. He went to the store when a call for shots fired and someone carrying a rifle came in. And he was killed in the line of duty. The other 9 victims' identities, as of a few hours ago when I prepared for this story, had not yet been released. But my instinct is that some of those names and identities will probably start to be made public soon. The situation, as we understand it, is that police arrived and found some individuals who were, it was a chaotic scene. At one point, we know officers escorted a man without a shirt and blood running from his leg out of the store in handcuffs, although they haven't yet even confirmed that that's the suspect. Officials have also not said whether the suspect is the individual that was taken to a particular hospital in Boulder or not. The hospital is not giving out any information. It's still all very early. And of course, every time that we have an incident like this, you see all of the sort of normal and predictable reactions from different people, those on the right whose priority is to defend the ability and right and legality of having guns and having whatever guns people want in whatever situations, even arguing that more people armed at this incident could have actually prevented it from being as bad. You also have people who understandably say this is yet, another rifle. And for all the talk about handguns being the vast majority of individual homicide incidents where there are 1 or 2 victims, rifles continue to play a prevalent and significant role in the mass shootings and people who go to that. I mean, for me, nothing really changes because of yet another tragic incident. We sort of know what the low-hanging fruit is around gun safety, and then we know sort of the bigger hills to climb. You will also get people who, anytime there's a shooting and people want to talk about gun laws, will say, you know, a tragedy is not the time to politicize gun control. And that's like a trash comment. That comment deserves to be thrown in the incinerator and incinerated and done away with completely. If you ever want to talk about gun safety in close time proximity to an acute event, you're told, oh, it's too soon. And then if you wait, you're told it's not really an issue. It's been a while since we had the last mass shooting. They never want to talk about it. And I think it's important not to be dissuaded, by that. We also, of course, saw, I'm not even going to get into it because it would be the entire show. But I think many of you won't be surprised to know that right-wing networks, including Fox News, during like all night last night, when every other network was covering this, they were covering, what's going on. Why did Joe Biden trip going up the stairs? That was a big part of Hannity. One Fox show did like a brief mention of the shooting, but the only context in which they mentioned it was how a Colorado college basketball team found out about the shooting shortly before their game, and they were really affected by the shooting during the game. It's like the trash coverage that we would expect, and that's no surprise to anybody. By tomorrow, we may know more about this as we start to learn more about possibly motive or other circumstances. We will talk about it. But as usual, it doesn't have to be a shooting motivated by anything in particular to reinforce the need to be dramatically changing the legal infrastructure around gun ownership. And again, universal background checks. I'm not saying that that's what's relevant here, but most of the country wants it. And much like with COVID relief, it doesn't matter. Republican elected officials just won't hear anything of any of it. Continues to be a tragedy that the world looks at us and says, what, how, why not do something? What is going on in the United States? It is a sickness that disproportionately affects this country. Jordan Peterson has returned to the public eye after a very long hiatus due to, as far as I understand it, being in a detox clinic in Russia in order to get off of benzodiazepines that he became addicted to, including being in a medically induced coma for some period of time. Then Peterson going from Russia to Serbia for further treatment, eventually getting COVID-19. But now he's back. And he's getting back to the interview circuit, and he's already saying really dangerous things. Now, I'm going to talk about one of the things he said during an interview with Brett Weinstein. And I know I'm stepping into a minefield here. The tricky thing about talking about the things Jordan Peterson says is that no matter what, his most devoted followers will say, David, you're misquoting him. You're misunderstanding him. So even if it appears as though Jordan Peterson said something that was wrong or wacky or dangerous, you are the one who doesn't get it, David. You are straw manning him. But what Jordan Peterson said is quite dangerous. And I think it's important to talk about it. But I will admit that in this clip we're going to look at, Peterson uses sort of interchangeable and sometimes vague terminology. So first we have to figure out what it is that he is saying. But the general message from Peterson here is medicine may be responsible for killing more people than the number of people that medicine saves. Again, that's what I'm hearing. Let's listen to the clip.
Then
I suspect if you did these statistics properly, I suspect that medicine, independent of public health, kills more people than it saves. I suspect if you factor in phenomena like the development of superbugs in hospitals, for example, that overall the net consequence of hospitals is negative. Now that's just a guess, but it could easily be wrong, but it also could not be wrong. And that is a good example, or that's where my thinking about what we don't know has taken me with regards to the critique of what we do.
The fact that it's even plausible is a stunning
fact. Well, medical error is the third leading cause of death.
Yep.
And that doesn't take into account the generation of superbugs, for example.
So there is a lot there, but a key quote here for what we're dealing with is Jordan Peterson saying, I suspect that medicine, independent of public health, kills more people than it saves. That's the main point. And this includes, as he says, the fact that in hospitals, sometimes people get infections and medical error. And that if you include all of that, he believes it's possible that medicine actually kills more people than it saves. Now, unfortunately, this is not plausible. This is a completely absurd idea. And in particular, when we have nearly half the country doubting the seriousness of COVID because of the nonsense spread by the right for a year, and a huge contingent of COVID anti-vaxxers that we have to contend with, this is a particularly dangerous time to be making completely wild, implausible claims about medicine. Let's take it piece by piece. First of all, medicine killing more people than it saves is ridiculous. Now, he says, aside from public health. So I'll exclude vaccination from this because he's kind of saying we're putting aside public health. He's not saying that, if you include public health initiatives like clean water, vaccination, he's saying we're not including that in his calculation. Think about the sheer number of people. Like, think about yourself from the time you were a little kid. Ear infection, sinus infection, things that before antibiotics would kill many people. Now they don't, thanks to being able to go to a doctor, be diagnosed, and get antibiotics. Dentistry, the number of people that used to die because of problems that start with the teeth, including how teeth problems create malnutrition where you can't eat. Never mind infections in the mouth. Modern dentistry, including fixing cavities. How many people have been saved by that? How many people are saved by heart bypasses in the United States each year who would otherwise die? 500,000 heart bypasses in the United States every single year. Very few have medical error related deaths associated with them. Just to pick, we could go through all day. 10,000 cases of testicular cancer each year, which medicine treats with a 95% success rate. That's hospitals. That's medicine saving people. And he actually says in the clip, I really don't have any idea about this, but he has such a cult of devoted followers that now they will take this and they will run with it. Peterson also talked about medical error as the third leading cause of death. Medical error is a problem, without a doubt, but comparing it to all the people saved by medicine, and it should also be mentioned that medical error has been dramatically overstated. And when good studies look at it, medical error is not nearly as bad as some like to claim. Now, there is malpractice. There is medical error, of course. But a Yale School of Medicine study found that the real number of truly preventable deaths in the U.S. in inpatients is about 22,000. You sometimes hear numbers like 40,000 to 100,000. Sometimes you hear 250,000. That's the number that is sometimes used to say it's the third leading cause of death. This study suggests that the number of otherwise healthy people who died just because of medical error could be as low as 7,100, and that the rest of the preventable / medical error deaths are in people with a life expectancy of 3 months, very sick people. Now, that doesn't make their deaths any less tragic. It doesn't mean we don't deal with malpractice and hold people accountable. But the point is, we're talking about people who in a perfect world have 3 months to live, whose care may have been mismanaged in a way that could have robbed them of time. It's no less tragic, I get it. But the idea of an epidemic of otherwise healthy people just dying from medical error, it's quite rare in the United States. The leading causes of death in the United States are mostly particular types of disease, including cancer or others, accidents, including car accidents. Okay, this type of stuff from Jordan Peterson will make some people more hesitant to get care, to get vaccines. And in the end, Peterson again admits he actually has no idea, but he believes it's plausible. It's really not plausible based on anything I was able to find about it. So the big news is that Jordan Peterson is back, everybody. For better or worse, make of it what you will. Friday, March 26th, one-day membership special. We're blowing out memberships. It's a vaccination-related membership special. If you would like to get a membership at an ungodly discounted rate, get on my mailing list at davidpakman.com. Friday morning, you'll get an email telling you exactly how to avail yourselves of this immorally cheap membership discount that we're offering. One of our sponsors today is Nebbia, the creator of the world's most innovative shower head. It uses only about half the water that other shower heads do, saving you money, helping the environment, but it's actually a lot more powerful than other shower heads on the market. It has twice the coverage of other shower heads. The water sprays with a ton of pressure. I've been using it in my bathroom at home. I love it. Only took a few minutes to set up, really easy, and it's been a totally different experience than any other shower head I've used. I can get in and out of the shower way quicker now because of how powerful it is. It only takes a few seconds to get completely rinsed off. So I was actually amazed that it's only using about half as much water. Nebbia also offers a number of shower accessories like shelves and curtains, which match perfectly with the design of the shower head. The shower head starts at just $199, but the first 100 people to go to Nebbia.com/Pakman and use code Pakman will get 15% off all Nebbia products. Welcome back to the show. Remember that we are mostly funded by individual memberships, one of which you can get at joinpakman.com. That also gets you the daily bonus show, more show every day. For those who choose it, sign up at joinpakman.com. So we learned this weekend that Donald Trump will be fighting back against, I guess, Twitter and Facebook and cancel culture, I don't know, by making a triumphant return to social media in 2 to 3 months on his own platform. Maybe it will be called Trump Book, or maybe it will be called Twit Trump or Trumpagram, who knows. Here is perpetual, never-ending, infinity Trump brown-noser Jason Miller explaining this on Fox News just a couple of days ago.
Donald Trump obviously has been booted off Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, which were a great megaphone for him. Does he plan to try to get back on social media, perhaps with some new outfit?
You know, Harry, this is really interesting, the fact that the president's been off of social media for a while, because his press releases, his statements have actually been getting almost more play than he ever did on Twitter before.
Now, that's completely untrue. Jason Miller, as usual, is lying. Trump having the bully pulpit on Twitter dwarfed those bizarre, sometimes almost sad and pathetic press releases he's been putting out. But that's not the key part here. The key part is Jason Miller telling us Trump is launching a social media network.
I'm not sure if that's because the length of them are a bit longer. I even had one reporter say that she thought it was much more elegant, the way that the president was able to communicate his thoughts, and it very much looked more presidential in that longer form. But I do think that we're going to see President Trump returning to social media in probably about 2 or 3 months here with his own platform. And this is something that I think will be the hottest ticket in social media. It's going to completely redefine the game, and everybody is going to be waiting and watching to see what exactly President Trump does, but it will be his own platform.
So just to follow up, will this be a platform that the president and the former president will create himself, will be working with another company, and obviously he'll be starting from scratch. He won't start out with 88 million Twitter followers.
Well, I can't go much further than what I was able to just share, but I can say that it will be big once he starts. There have been a lot of high-powered meetings he's been having at Mar-a-Lago with some teams of folks who've been coming in. And I got to tell you, it's not just one company that's approached the president. There have been numerous companies, but I think the president does know what direction that he wants to head here. And this new platform is going to be big, and everyone wants him. He's going to bring millions and millions, tens of millions of people to this new platform.
Look at the hyperbole. It will be the hottest ticket in social media, even hotter maybe, I guess, than Parler and Gab. And I love the reference to high-powered meetings with teams of folks. Teams of folks have been flocking to Mar-a-Lago for high-powered meetings. So anyway, it's very clear that Donald Trump is in various ways testing whether he should or could successfully run in 2024. Part of that is what Donald Trump announced at that CPAC speech at the end of February, that you can donate to his PAC, Save America, and he will play kingmaker. Don't donate to the Republican Party. If you donate to the Republican Party, they might put money towards so-called rhinos, Republicans in name only, which Trump doesn't like, people like Mitt Romney. Trump, if you donate to him, will decide which Republicans are worthy of support. He will primary the bad Republicans that he has identified. He will support the pro-Trump Republicans. And as we said before, if he can do that, if he can wield that degree of power, it helps him to look stronger for 2024. Here, of course, recognizing that Twitter was a big part of his winning in 2016 in the first place, being absent on Twitter now because he's banned, he's going to try to create an alternative, all with the same purpose, to regain that power and to rebuild his bully pulpit. Now, will it actually happen? Because remember that back in August of 2020 or July even, We were just 2 weeks away from getting Trump's new health care plan, which he was going to roll out. It was going to be perfect. It was going to be signed into law. It was going to replace Obamacare. Never came out, and Donald Trump's gone. And back in 2015, Donald Trump said he would release his tax returns, and he never did. So lots of things that Trump claims he will do or others claim Trump will do never end up happening. I have no idea. It may happen. It may not. What we can be absolutely certain of is that if Donald Trump does launch a social media platform, it will very quickly become a central node of disinformation propaganda. It's also funny to hear Jason Miller say Trump is going to redefine social media. It's always so endlessly hyperbolic. It's the same thing they said about Trump's presidency. Now, in a sense, Trump redefined the presidency to the point of bad in showing how corrupt a president could be, but redefining it in terms of finally draining the swamp and changing everything. He was the most corrupt administrator in the modern political era, but that's not exactly a change I'd be bragging about. So maybe we'll see more of the same with this social media thing. Maybe it'll just never happen, as so many of the things that are promised never do. But the latest is Trump will return with his own social media platform. Let me know what you think it should be called. I'm terrible at this stuff. Trumpagram and Trump book is the only thing I could come up with because I'm just completely uncreative. But I know some of you will have some better ideas. We absolutely must go over a bizarre and embarrassing interview given yesterday to Fox News by former President Donald Trump. And it was humiliating and embarrassing, not just for Trump, but also for Fox News, which in the middle of the interview falsely reported the resignation of Joe Biden's Secretary of Homeland Security. They just reported it in the middle of the interview with Trump, then had to walk it back after Trump had already reacted to it. So let's get into it. Donald Trump kicked the interview off with really similar rhetoric about immigrants to that of his infamous 2015 speech about Mexicans. A lot of this vocabulary will probably sound familiar to you.
Bringing the violence to our country, because many of the people coming are not nonviolent people. They're violent people. Many of the people coming. These countries don't send out their finest. And in some cases, I'm sure you have wonderful, fine people, but you also have criminals. You have murderers, you have sex traffickers, you have a lot of very bad people coming into our country.
The theme in this interview was Trump saying ridiculous things with no pushback whatsoever from interviewer Harris Faulkner. Here's another example where, again, Donald Trump continues to say he actually won, not Joe Biden. Harris Faulkner just accepts it. No big deal.
Policies, and even, look, we won the election as far as I'm concerned. We had a great election. We got almost 75 million votes, but we were going to make it even more stringent with the understanding that we want people to come into our country, but they have to come in legally. Very simple.
So let me ask you this. I want to get back a moment and revisit the COVID-19, because that
just no pushback at all from Faulkner, despite the fact that Donald Trump is saying something completely, verifiably, empirically untrue. She just moves on. Then Donald Trump makes false claims about Joe Biden's policy at the border. Again, no pushback from Harris Faulkner whatsoever.
I mean, it was just announced they're allowing everybody to walk through and just come in, and they're not taking anything. They have no information about the people.
And then we get to arguably the most surreal moment of the interview, other than when Trump said, "I don't know why I'm here. You really called me." We'll get to that. Harris Faulkner interrupts and falsely reports live on air that the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, has resigned. Trump says, well, I'm not surprised to hear that because things are so bad at the border. And then Harris Faulkner says, oh, that actually didn't happen. Take a look at this.
Because it's just happened now, and I want to double check this with our producers. The DHS Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, has resigned, Mr. President.
Well, I'm not surprised. Good. That's a big victory for our country.
Hold on. Let me stop. Let me listen to my team one more time. Forgive me. Forgive me. That has not happened. But and I apologize, listening to the team and you.
Cross off
but
that victory.
I know that you.
Where do they even get that? Literal fake news being reported live on Fox News. And maybe that warrants more discussion on its own. Trump then hilariously says Joe Biden isn't being transparent.
What do you say about the transparency with the current administration?
Well, there is none. There is none.
Remember, Trump promised his tax returns 6 years ago, never released them. Trump promised to drain the swamp. He didn't. Trump lied about what he privately knew about COVID. I could go on and on and on. But Trump says Biden isn't being transparent. And then Donald Trump is asked, why are you choosing to weigh in so strongly? And he just sort of says, I don't know. You guys called me, really.
Most presidents, ex-presidents like yourself, do not weigh in at this level. Why did you feel like you needed to on this issue?
Well, you called me. I didn't call you, in all fairness. But the reason I weigh in is very simple.
You wrote the statement last night. It was pretty strong.
Well, I wrote a statement. I put out a statement.
So an irritated sounding Trump there, always just so strange. And then Donald Trump starts to wrap up the interview by saying that China is, quote, looking at woke. That's pretty unusual terminology. China's looking at woke. And then he says, I don't know, something about Dr. Seuss.
Which nobody has ever seen before, in order to accomplish the Green New Deal nonsense. They're destroying it with woke. When China looks at woke and they see the biggest problem we have is Dr. Seuss, in the meantime, they're building factories and trying to kill us in so many different ways. They laugh at us. They think we're so... Frankly, they think our country is stupid when they look at this, when our competitors look at what's going on in our country, taking down the statues to great heroes and so many other things. Now, I do it because I want to do what's right, and they are destroying our country.
Isn't that truly something? China is going to be building factories and trying to kill us. So Donald Trump trying to rehab his greatest hits, essentially, while at the same time telling more lies mixed in with a false resignation report from Fox News in the middle of it, having to almost immediately be walked back. I mean, this is the epitome of the Trump interview. Trump won't stop lying. Interviewer won't question any of the lies, but reports her own literal fake news in the middle of the interview. We'll have more on this interview because it was so wacky and wide-ranging. On the David Pakman Show Instagram. You can find us there at David Pakman Show. The number one funding source for the David Pakman Show has been and continues to be membership. And membership is not just a feel-good thing. You get access to the world-famous bonus show every single day just for members, as well as commercial-free audio and video feeds of the show day in and day out. You can sign up for membership very, very quickly at joinpakman.com. That's joinpakman.com. If the normal prices strike you as high, by all means, use the coupon code BETTER21, all one word, all lowercase. Become a member today. Today, we're going to be speaking with Jonathan Cohn, who's a senior national correspondent at HuffPost and also author of the book, The 10-Year War, Obamacare and the Unfinished Crusade for Universal Coverage. Great to have you on, Jonathan.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So to start with, you know, for a while, the way that particularly the right, but even sometimes Democrats would talk about Obamacare was this sort of like appendage onto what was there before, which could be cut off and separated kind of at any time. The language of, well, we can repeal it and we'll put something else in place. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we seem to be getting beyond that to where Obamacare is no longer this kind of standalone appendage to the healthcare system. And it's just more part of the status quo. And it's becoming more of the system that we would have to modify or work off of if we want to do further changes. Is my perception accurate as far as that goes?
Yeah, I mean, I think just by default almost, when you have something that exists for as long as the Affordable Care Act has existed, you know, when it's so entrenched in our system now that to pull it out would be very hard. It's true. People have insurance that they rely upon. The healthcare industry is now sort of reoriented itself around having this program in place, and so pulling it out now is you have to pull out a whole bunch of wiring that goes with it. And it's interesting because historically this is one of the obstacles to passing reform, right? It's that the status quo is always hard to change. Well, now the Affordable Care Act, that's why it was hard to pass the Affordable Care Act. That's why it was such a fight and continued to be such a fight. But now it's been around for 10 years, it's now it's part of the status quo and it's hard to change. And I think you see that in part by the behavior of the Republicans, who don't really talk about repeal anymore, which, as you know, it wasn't that long ago. It was all they could talk about.
Yeah. And sometimes I hear the criticism from folks who believe that the Affordable Care Act doesn't go nearly far enough. And I'm under that umbrella to some degree, but not, there's certainly a spectrum within that. Sometimes you hear the critique that Barack Obama should have started at the position of Medicare for all and then negotiated to something that would have been better than what we got. I don't subscribe to that exactly because, he wasn't for Medicare for all. It would be unlikely to expect someone to start a negotiation with a position that's not even their stated position. But I do think that maybe there would have been a way to end up with a public option. Having chronicled the way that this all came together, is it unreasonable for me to think that some other approach might have given us a public option back in 2010?
So I wouldn't say unreasonable, certainly. Any critique is reasonable. And I think, reasonable people can debate about this. I will say I'm very skeptical of that argument, though, for two reasons. So number one, in studying the history of healthcare, there was a century of working on this, basically, and almost without exception, it was a failure. Reforming healthcare is really hard. Reforming it given the constraints of the United States government, where the Senate and the power of special interests is even harder. The country politically was in a different place 10 years ago than it is today. I think a lot of people who are more progressive minded don't remember that, the political conversation was just a more conservative conversation. We were still in the back end of the Reagan era where everyone was very skeptical of government. And the only reason healthcare reform got as far as it did, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is that there was a real effort for the 10 years leading up to the Affordable Care Act, so the 10 years before the 10-year war, by Democrats to really get together and say, look, the only way we're going to get through this, the only way we're going to overcome our past failures is to all get on the same page. And Medicare for all was just not in the conversation. It's not like it was today, where it had been the subject of a presidential campaign for two consecutive elections, where you had sort of visible proponents who had a big grassroots movement behind it. So, if Obama had gone in sort of, offering to do Medicare for all at the beginning, I think just there would have been, the whole thing would have fallen apart. And in terms of getting a public option through, now, obviously, he did endorse a public option. He ran on a public option. It was part of his plan. At the end of the day, they took it out, and a lot of progressives felt like he never really fought for it. There is something, there's maybe something to that. I think a lot of progressives felt like he could have pushed harder. The flip side of the argument is the votes were not there. In the United States Senate, there were a whole group of senators, and also in the House, there were some conservative Democrats, although it was less of an issue there. But in the Senate, you had a bunch of conservative Democrats who would not vote for it. And they had no margin for error. They needed every single vote. And it's really hard to imagine a scenario where you could get it through, especially given how opposed the sort of most conservative members of the caucus. When they got to the bill and they were getting to the end, they got to 55, 56 votes. They couldn't get Joe Lieberman. They couldn't get Ben Nelson. Both Lieberman and Nelson were dead set against the public option. And there were others who were not so vocal about it, but were also against it. So I have a hard time seeing how a bill passes with a public option in it.
Yeah, that to a lesser extent, we saw this with the $15 minimum wage in the recent COVID-19 relief bill, where there were some who were saying this is as simple as overriding the parliamentarian and putting the $15 minimum wage into the bill. But then it simply wouldn't have passed because it doesn't seem Democrats had the vote. I mean, obviously Obamacare was bigger and changed in a more systemic way a lot of aspects of how the system worked. But sometimes maybe people forget that there's still a lot of very centrist Democrats in the Senate.
There are. It's the same exact problem today. I mean, and it's always those, senators on the fringe who have the leverage ultimately, and they have the leverage. Let's remember why they have the leverage. I mean, obviously, if you're in a situation where whether it's you're going for 60 votes or 50 votes, and you have exactly the number you need, so that's this. Let's say today you have exactly 50 Democrats. Obviously any one senator can object and sort of hold up proceedings. And so they, in theory, have leverage. But at the end of the day, on the Affordable Care Act, at least, what happened was the people who were in favor of reform, the liberals, the progressives, they wanted this very badly. This was something, getting universal coverage or getting close to universal coverage. It was in their DNA. It's why they got elected to Congress in the first place. And the more conservative Democrats, a lot of them, they were in favor of it. But, they weren't that passionate about it. And they would have been okay dropping it or at least compromising to something much, much smaller. And so, in a game of chicken, who wins? It's the one who's willing to kind of let it all go and fall off the cliff or have the crash or whatever the analogy is. And, the liberal Democrats in the day weren't willing to let this thing die. And as a result, they had less leverage.
There's no question that there are some who maybe understate or maybe understand the good things that came from the Affordable Care Act. And there's a list that probably will ring a bell to many in my audience, including establishing exchanges, the pre-existing conditions provision, young adults being able to stay on their parents' insurance until age 26, and many other things. On the other hand, when you see that premiums, even within the exchanges, and me as a self-employed person, I have one of those plans. The price of these premiums is going up in a cartoonish way that dramatically outpaces inflation and cost of living and all these other things. It's hard to feel as though it came close to doing nearly enough. What I'm curious about is, does it help set up whatever the next step is going to be? How does it serve as a bridge to what so many of us know has to have more done on it? Or are we really just starting fresh again whenever someone decides to take it up? Maybe it'll be this administration.
It's a bridge, and I think it's a very big bridge. I think it has put the building blocks in place, a lot of the key building blocks of what I would consider a working universal healthcare system, right?
Really?
So, yeah, absolutely. What I consider, how do you define universal healthcare? Let's take a step back. A universal healthcare system, to me, and I think is a sort of generally accepted definition among people who study this, everybody has insurance, everybody has good insurance, so they're not facing bankruptcy if they have big medical bills. They don't have to worry. They don't care because it costs. And there's some kind of, principle that everybody can get insurance regardless of pre-existing medical condition. And then there's, some kind of control of costs, so you keep the system from becoming too expensive. Now, we haven't fully realized any of those yet. But what did the Affordable Care Act do? Well, first thing is it got 20 million people insurance. So right away, you've closed the gap significantly to the number of people who don't have insurance. You've put standards in place for what insurance should cover. The standards aren't strong enough, but they're stronger than what was before.
Right.
Similarly, there's, if you're buying on the exchanges, there is financial assistance, there are subsidies. The problem is for a lot of people, they haven't been big enough. And so people like you are paying these crazy premiums. So how do you build on that? Well, actually, we're actually seeing that right now. The Biden administration, the Democrats with the COVID bill actually took the first step towards that, which is they threw a bunch more money into that financial assistance. So those premiums will come down. The out-of-pocket costs will come down. They should probably come down further to really get to a universal coverage system. And by the way, now you need to start thinking about people with employer coverage who have high premiums and high deductibles, and what are you going to do for them?
Right.
But, you've made progress. You've established this key principle that everybody is entitled to insurance regardless of pre-existing condition. And those are two very big building blocks of a universal coverage system. So there's more to do.
Yeah.
But you can certainly build on that. Now, whether you build on that by just making the Affordable Care Act more generous and opening up the exchanges to more people, or you say, look, what we really need is some kind of public option that can eventually grow into a Medicare for all system, or we just need to go to a Medicare for all system. I mean, you can take those different paths to universal coverage, but to me, at least, I feel like we've moved down that road regardless.
Yeah, the late Uwe Reinhardt, who's written about this, has your definition of what we mean by universal. It doesn't have to be Medicare for all. And he talked extensively in his last book, I believe it was, about the way that those systems could look. I guess maybe the zoom out is conceding all of the things you said. If we make an Obamacare's worth of progress every 11 years, we're a long time from a system that many of us would consider to be a system that's working really well.
Yeah, well, I would say, I mean, that's an interesting way to put it. I haven't quite thought of it in that way, but if you think of, let's create a unit, Obamacare units. Right?
Yeah,
that's a unit of progress.
Right.
One Obamacare, two Obamacare. So we just took an Obamacare unit, and I'd say the 1960s we took an Obamacare size unit with Medicare and Medicaid. Some people would argue that was bigger. Someone also was smaller, but let's, for sake of argument, say that was an Obamacare kind of leap. So I'm guessing maybe one or two more of those leaps gets you there pretty much. I mean, we did close. I mean, with this Obamacare leap cut the number of uninsured in half, basically. So, I mean, that's a pretty big jump.
I mean, I think the problem with that, Jonathan, would be, listen, like, as I'm going to tell my audience in our next segment about a recent, interaction with the medical system, I pay $520 a month for a silver plan. I don't get a subsidy. I don't deserve a subsidy. I can afford it. That's totally fine. But there's a lot of people who also are much closer to the edge on when they get a subsidy, who would pay my same $520 a month and still have a $75 copay and still have a $2,000 lab deductible to meet. It's completely unaffordable. So I feel like for them to say simply 20 million more people got care, many of them are paying for the premium, but they can't actually afford to use any of the care. And that, I think, is not in those numbers that is so, just, hey, we cut it in half. Yeah, but a lot of those people aren't really using the care because they can't afford to.
Sure. So the last thing I want to do is to downplay that in any way. And I spend a lot of time in the book talking about those problems and those people. So I completely agree. And is why we have so much more to do. I would say that it is also true that for all the people who now have insurance that they can't use, there are a lot of people who got better insurance and got cheaper insurance. And that also doesn't show up in the 20 million.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who were buying on their own who actually now are paying less. And again, I do think these enhancements that came with the COVID relief bill are going to make a difference. Because I mean, that I don't know where you fall on this spectrum, but one of the things, it basically said to everyone who's now buying on the exchanges, if you're already buying subsidized coverage, you're going to get a bigger subsidy. And if you're one of those people who doesn't get a subsidy, you might be eligible for one now. Now, again, I think even when that's all done, this insurance is going to be pricey for some people, and there are going to still be people who pay too much. And again, I don't in any way want to downplay that or say that's not a reason that we need to act soon. But I do think, it is sort of, it's a tough kind of get across, especially if you're a politician. But somehow you need to get across the idea that we actually did accomplish a lot and we still have a lot to do.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to say it. Much was done and much remains to be done. And of course, in these next couple of years, when Democrats control the White House and the Senate and the House of Representatives, we'll see whether anything does get done. And certainly what was in the COVID relief bill also shouldn't be understated. The book shows both sides, and the book is called The 10-Year War: Obamacare and the Unfinished Crusade for Universal Coverage. We've been speaking with the book's author, Jonathan Cohn. Jonathan, I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them. As we've already talked about, there are a number of different people being sued by Dominion voting systems for the allegedly libelous claims that have been made by people like Rudy Giuliani and Trump's other lawyer, Sidney Powell, although it went back and forth as to whether she really is his lawyer or not. And now she is coming up with what I call the Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, Fox News defense, which is, You can't sue me over the things I said about you, Dominion, because nobody in their right mind would believe that I was saying things that are actually to be believed. This is actually the defense that she's putting out there. Forbes has a very interesting report which explains that former Trump lawyer and conspiracy theorist Sidney Powell moved to dismiss a lawsuit filed against her by Dominion Voting Systems, arguing that her earlier claims that Dominion was involved in an orchestrated voter fraud effort were so outrageous that, quote, reasonable people would not accept such statements as fact. We experienced this with Tucker Carlson. When Tucker was recently sued, Fox News lawyers actually argued in court, people should understand, viewers should know that Tucker isn't reporting facts. He's using hyperbole and doing like an entertainment show. So you can't hold him accountable for the things that he says, which is a fascinating and, of course, true defense, but not at all how Fox News wants to be understood. They want to be understood as reporting facts when it's convenient. When the legal rubber hits the road, all of a sudden, these shows are entertainment. This is hyperbole. This is a performance. Alex Jones, his lawyers using the defense in one of the many lawsuits that Alex Jones, the conspiracy theorist, faced, saying Jones is playing a character on his show. The things he is saying are more like an actor reading lines. You wouldn't charge an actor with sexual assault because in character they admit to a sexual assault. It's the same essential. They didn't use that example, but that's essentially what they're saying. It's the same with Alex Jones and Sidney Powell's lawyers. Yes, lawyers need lawyers. That if MAGA stands for anything, it's making attorneys get attorneys. Sidney Powell's lawyers argued that her claims about Dominion were, quote, opinions and legal theories and not statements meant for the public to literally believe. And that she simply shouldn't be held legally liable in this way. Now, what's completely pathetic and transparent about this is that she was saying these things as a lawyer who was actually filing motions. Now, as we know, the Trump campaign and administration went back and forth about whether Sidney Powell actually represented them. Trump did tweet multiple times listing Sidney Powell as someone who was leading the effort to overturn the election that Trump claimed was stolen from him after she went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs during some press briefing meant to explain their legal strategy. The Trump campaign or the Trump White House said she has nothing to do with us. But then she was back at the White House meeting with Trump and talking about, I don't remember if she was talking about martial law or seizing voting machines or whatever the case was. But the bottom line is that lawyers are saying these were just, ideas. They weren't meant to be taken as fact. And she doesn't even really have enough connection to this area of law. And she shouldn't be held accountable. So the lessons here are, number one, they are admitting she's a charlatan. The legal defense is based on nobody should have believed the things that she was saying. And number two, this applies to so much of right-wing media. You know, when they get in trouble for making completely dangerous anti-medical, anti-science-based statements about coronavirus, and the rubber meets the road, legally, so to speak, they say, oh, yeah, I mean, we weren't giving medical advice. This was just like, these were just ideas and nobody should take them seriously. Everybody should be talking to their doctor or whatever the case may be. And in fact, there are some right-wing channels. We were watching a live stream of, I think it was on Right Side Broadcasting, when during CPAC, I think it was Mike Lindell or someone else started making bogus claims about coronavirus and the election results. They cut away and read a statement which was about, we are not endorsing any of these claims. Everybody should check with their own doctors or whatever the case may be. So they all sort of know that this is just something they're doing for ratings and to create clicks and interest. But they will immediately abandon these positions as soon as it gets legally hot, as it is getting now for Sidney Powell. And we'll just follow and see ultimately what happens with this lawsuit against her. But she's going for the no one could possibly have believed the things I was saying anyway defense. So in the past, I've told stories about how broken our healthcare system is through personal experiences I've had with the healthcare system. Of course, many of you remember the appendectomy incident, which I described in the YouTube video titled My $27,495 Appendicitis. That was a doozy back in late 2019. There was also what we now know of as the podiatry debacle. That was earlier 2019. You can hear about that in the YouTube video titled My $829 10-minute long doctor's visit. I have a new one for you today. This one comes to us from the world of otorhinolaryngology, as many of us know it, ear, nose, and throat medicine. Now, I'm not telling you this so that you as a European viewer can write to me and say, David, this would have cost me $0 out of pocket in my country, or David, this would have been $20 in my country. I know that. Please don't email me about it, okay? It's a look into our healthcare system. I know how well yours is working. I don't need you to tell me, David, that would have been free out of pocket for me. So I, as a self-employed person, get my own health insurance through what are called the exchanges. And for years, I've had what is called a silver level plan. Now, the gist of how this works is, bronze, silver, gold, platinum. The higher you go, the more you pay each month. But in theory, the less you pay for services as you use them in terms of copays and deductibles. So like a bronze level plan would be cheaper monthly than my silver plan, but it would typically have a higher deductible and a higher copay that needs to be met, the higher deductible that needs to be met before the insurance will cover anything. Silver plans cost more, but they cover more. Gold and platinum, you might end up paying $1,000 a month for a single person, but you might have really, really cheap or no copays. Okay, fine. I've had a silver level plan for years, and my premiums have dramatically increased, as have my copays. So for the same plan over the years, in 2018, I was paying $439 a month, and my specialist copay was $40. In 2019, it went up to $454 a month, and my copay went up to $50. In 2020, I was up to $478 a month, and my copay was up to $70. And this year, I am paying $520 a month, and my copays are up to $75. So right now, I pay $520 a month. That's $62.40 for the year, just for the coverage. That's if I use nothing. I guess I get an annual physical for that. Right now, I am paying that if I don't avail myself of any services. But I'm aware that for lab work, like blood draws, MRIs, CAT scans, I have a $2,000 deductible to meet. I have to pay the first $2,000 for that type of labs and MRIs and that type of thing before my insurance will cover anything. So I've been having some ear pain. My dentist thought it was caused by clenching my jaw at night, might be a TMJ type of thing, but it's been going on for a while. So eventually my doctor said, go see an ENT to rule out other things. So I'm thinking, great. I pay $520 a month for insurance. I know my specialist copay is $75. I make an appointment. I get a referral. I confirm this doctor is in my network. I'm good to go with my $75. I go last week. Doctor looks, says, things look good. Let's do what's called, I just want to look in your throat. Let's do a laryngoscopy, meaning they put a camera into my throat through the nose. I don't recommend it. It's not fun, but okay, it was medically what my doctor wanted to do. Let's do an audiometry workup to test your hearing and make sure you don't have like a eustachian tube issue. I say, sure. Now, this is all stuff that was done in the office. So when she suggests it, I say, yeah, let's do it. I'm here. Let's do what you want to do. So everything looks fine. It's probably TMJ from clenching at night. I've got a diagnosis. Fantastic. I pay my $75 and I go home. I now get a bill saying that this was a $1,033 visit and I'm going to owe almost another $500. And I say, wait a second. How can this be? I paid my $520 for my insurance. The doctor is in network. I had a referral. I paid my copay. I don't have a deductible for specialists. How do I owe another $500? Well, I look closely at the bill and it says, that's right, David. The office visit was billed at $420, typical for specialists. You paid your $75. My insurance, good for them, negotiated a discount, so they add another $92, and the office visit is paid. But then, here we go, that camera in my throat for 30 seconds, that's another $400, David. The audiometry, that's another $140. The tympanometry, which is 5 seconds to check the pressure in my ears, that's another $50. And lo and behold, that's billed like a blood test. That's billed like an MRI. So even though I'm in a room with the doctor and she looks in my ears with one tool and looks in my nose with another and then puts in a camera, the camera is a completely different type of thing. That is like lab work or an MRI or blood work. And I need to meet my $2,000 a year deductible, which of course I haven't met because it's March. Now, thankfully, my insurance did me the favor of negotiating better rates. So even though the camera normally costs $400, they've negotiated it down to $280 for me. The hearing tests, they've negotiated down to $110. So bottom line, in addition to my $75 copay and paying $520 for a month of health insurance, I owe an additional $466. In essence, if I didn't have any insurance, I could have said, do you offer a cash discount? I might have paid a little more for some of these items. I probably can't negotiate as good a rate as my insurance company can, but I would have avoided paying the $520 a month in premiums all along. So needless to say, I'm thinking about maybe I switch to something called direct primary care, and then a high deductible plan and kind of self-insure for the higher deductible. It's a mess. If you're in Europe, don't email me. I know this would have cost you nothing out of pocket. You don't need to make me feel any worse, but that's another bit of insight into the American healthcare system. We have a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. The Eggman called in to tell us what he thinks a Putin versus Biden debate would look like. Take a listen.
Hi, Dave. I'll sum up a Biden-Putin debate.
Yeah.
Biden, I fired people for smoking marijuana a long time ago. Putin, I murdered people and put them into gulag for smoking marijuana. Dave, I'm so upset by what Biden is doing, and I'll tell you this. I can't wait until he's gone, and Kamala Harris feels so guilty about putting so many African Americans in prison for marijuana that she finally federally legalizes it. I don't think it's going to happen until she becomes president. I hope the conspiratorial right-wingers are right, that Biden is just holding her spot for a little while. Can he just step down already? Shalom, brother.
All right. So the Eggman, very, very aggressive there and always weighing in. Shalom to the Eggman. On today's bonus show, the latest plan from Louis DeJoy to keep making the post office even worse. Can Biden get him out before he does it? We will also talk about a report that the richest Americans may be underreporting their incomes by as much as 20%. And Trump was right about something. Trump predicted that news ratings would tank if he was gone. That has happened, although some of it is just the cyclical nature of people tuning out after elections. We will talk about corporate media ratings on today's bonus show as well. Don't miss it. Join Pakman.com. Get instant access to the bonus show as a David Pakman Show member. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Nebbia is a revolutionary showerhead that saves you money by using 45% less water, but with a stream of water that's way more powerful than what you get with other showerheads. To get 15% off, go to Nebbia.com/Pakman and use the code Pakman.